the Evolution Security Podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show this week. Brian here, along with Eric and Aaron. How you guys doing?
Doing good, doing good.
I'm doing wonderful, guys. Good to be talking to you.
Oh man, it is nice to be back again this week, and we got a really big deal this week. I mean, it's we've had some pretty high caliber guests, but we got a good one coming up here. As we talked about before, Mr. Massad Ayoob is going to be with us tonight for an interview, and we are just stoked about it. Got a little bit of business to do up front here before we jump into that. Of course, we don't want to get started without at least giving a shout out to the folks that help us do what we're doing. Tenacor is one of those companies, and Tenacor makes holsters and products that really perform, and they come from guys who are in the industry and just, man, if you listen to our Jeff Mao interview, guys who are just committed to making the best product that they can. And you can find those guys at tenacor.com, Tenicor, Tenacor.com, and of course they're also on Facebook. And if you are interested in buying one of their holsters or products, like the Velo 4, which is one of the holsters that we use here, or their new Kurtum 3, awesome rigs, man. Use EvoSec at checkout for 10% off. Again, that's EVOSEC at checkout for 10% off. And Eric, you got something to share as well?
Yes, I do. And one of our other wonderful sponsors who we continue to be excited about is Origin USA. And Origin is very special in the sense that all three of us do jiu-jitsu. Origin started as a jiu-jitsu company making gis in the United States with cotton grown in the United States made by American workers. So that was their origin. And now they've branched off into all kinds of clothing, boots, so on and so forth, and also the Jocko brand supplements that all three of us use as well. So please check them out at originmaine.com. That's ORIGINMAINE.com. And you can also use EvoSec 10 for 10% off at checkout. So go give them your patronage because they help us out.
Awesome. Yeah, awesome. But both awesome companies. I'm glad they're on board. And again, like you said, Eric, we've used their products and support them even before they come on board with us. So it's awesome.
Very cool.
Well, I'd like to add to that, frankly, that we are never going to be folks that just take sponsorships because we're looking for either revenue or I'm just looking for more sponsors. We're going to use sponsors or work with sponsors that we believe in, products that we use, and that we would recommend to our clients. So that will always be a staple of EvoSec.
Nice. Well, and another thing that we're going to reach out right now to you listeners, our listenership is growing every month and continues to rise. And we literally have thousands of listeners, and we just want to call out and say, hey man, if you guys enjoy what you're hearing, take a minute, write us a review, even if you're just clicking the 5-star button and submitting. But if you got 2 minutes just to write a couple kind words, on whatever platform you listen to, obviously iTunes is one of the primary ones, but of course, we're on Stitcher and some of the other major platforms as well. And that just really helps us keep our ratings up and allows other people to find us. And that's how we propagate. So we really are reaching out and asking you as the listener this week, take a couple minutes if you enjoy what you're hearing, and that just is going to help us continue to bring you this high level of content that we feel we're producing. And you can find us in a bunch of platforms online. I'll let Eric explain those.
Yeah, and I'll just add to what Brian is saying. You know, we are in a firearms and self-defense platform, which it's tough to bubble up in that, not because of the all the additional shows, but let's face it, that there's not a lot of support for some of us out there from the mainstream. So I think sometimes we get pushed down to the genres that aren't seen as much. So yes, like Brian said, if you guys leave a review, it's more likely that we'll be found. So thank you very much for that. And as far as the other platforms, you can check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at EvoSec USA. That's EVOSEC USA on all three of those platforms. Please come check us out over there. We go back and forth with some of our clients on there and friends, trainers, instructors. So yeah, come on there and let's talk. Also, please give us an email with any kind of request, whatever show content you'd like to see or hear. And also, if you got something that you don't like about the show, let us know and we'll talk with you about it. So you can find us at crew@evosec.org. So that's CREW at EVOSEC.org for the email.
Nice. Thanks for sharing, man. Well, I think that's about all the business and accounting we got up front here to share with you. So with no further ado, I think we'll just go ahead and move into our interview. And we'd like to welcome to the show Mr. Massad Ayoob. How are you doing, sir?
Not bad for an old guy. How are you guys doing?
Good. Good. We are really, really blessed to have you here, man. It's something we've wanted to do for a while, and it's really cool that we're gonna get to spend some time with you. So, I think we'll just go ahead and get right after it. Eric, you got something you want to start with?
Roger. Yeah, welcome to the show, Moss. We thank you very much for blessing us with your time. I just want to first start off with saying that you've been influencing myself and my brother well over 2 decades from when he and I got our first Ruger P95 back when we could first get a concealed carry license. We've since moved on beyond that pistol. Not that gear's the big thing, but anyway, I just wanted to thank you very much for all of the incredible education that you've provided the gun community over the years.
Don't thank me. Thank all the people that I learned it from.
Most assuredly, that's one of the biggest reasons we love learning from you is because you are always a student, and we're going to kind of hit on that here later in the show. But let me start with a 2-part question. And this is around your new book, Straight Talk on Armed Defense, which I'll just start with that. What an incredible book. And frankly, I think that it should stand out there on its own as one of the most important books that everybody out in the audience right now, if you do not have that book, go out and purchase it, and purchase more than one so that you can gift it to others, because it is a superb work of an amalgamation of the best and brightest, to use Moss's terms, in the firearms and self-protection community. So Moss, on that note, you speak on, in the beginning of the book, all the various tactical conferences and symposiums that you went to over the years, and it enabled you to learn from the best and brightest. What was the impetus behind that book?
Well, the impetus was basically from a lifetime of learning from guys like these and gals like these. I figured out real early, if you don't read, you can't write, and if you don't learn, you can't teach. Self-defense, if you look at it in the broad scope, is a very broad and very large puzzle that no one of us has all the pieces to. And what's worse, it's in many ways a constantly changing puzzle. As you see patterns of crime changing, you see developments of things like the carjacking craze, the flash mob craze, the introduction of fentanyl into the recreational drug community and things like that. Basically, with any of this, it's real easy for some of the, and I've seen it happen with some of the pioneers who really changed the paradigms with new thinking and new concepts, that they had invested their ego so much in what had brought them to prominence that they stopped looking for new things. They stopped the research that had made them great. And within a few years, they had fossilized and made themselves obsolescent. So it's essentially a constantly changing business. You've got to stay on top of what's happening. And the big thing that you've got to do is not just look at the literature, but talk to the people in the field. Talk to the street cops. Talk to the attorneys who are trying the cases. And what you'll see is essentially it's a classic case of as soon as you think you've got all the answers, some SOB changes the questions. So you've got to be constantly learning. You've got to be getting feedback from the field. In the world of medicine and in the 1950s, it seemed like a great idea to give thalidomide to pregnant women. And you saw how that worked out in real life with the generation of deformed thalidomide babies. In self-defense, we've seen a whole lot of stuff that when it was presented to us, here's the answer. And in the field, turned out it was maybe a partial answer, but certainly not a complete one. So you've got to be following the research. You've got to be reaching out to the field. And you've got to realize you're in a broad, multidimensional discipline in which every single one of those dimensions is a life study in and of itself.
Well, and Moss, that's why I love this book, because that's exactly what it is to me. And I'm sitting here looking at the book right now, and it's my book has a ton, as I sit here and look through it, highlights. I've got Post-it notes, marking pages. You know, it's just something that's gonna benefit me for years to come, if not through the rest of my life. I believe that. So. What I will tell you is Craig Douglas is a dear friend of ours, and of course that came through his tutelage. And hitting on something that you said, and our audience members hear us mention Craig all the time, but it's for a reason. But his test bed using the marking cartridges and the scenario-based training, I think is a culmination partly of what you're saying is like, okay, testing what actually works. And that was one of the reasons why I also was like, hey, Craig's in this book. I'm definitely going to check this out. That wasn't the only reason, but John Hearn's section, the first chapter is incredible. I mean, I can go on and on. But as far as the second part of the question, and you kind of hit on this already, but I'd just like to reiterate, you've always remained a student, correct?
Absolutely. Again, the rule is if you can't learn, you can't teach. If you don't stay current, you're going to fossilize yourself.
Roger, thank you very much. Aaron, what you got, buddy?
Yes, so I think this is going to take us into a pretty deep subject, and I've heard you speak on this before, but I would love to get your take on it again. Now, you've talked a lot about what to do after you've been in a deadly force event. For instance, what to say on the 911 call, how to speak and deal with the responding officers, of course, other do's and don'ts, and what else to expect from that event.
Well, expect the worst and hope for the best. The key element right from the beginning, you be the one to call 911. The entire criminal justice system is geared on the assumption that the complainant, the person who calls in, was the victim, that whomever was complained about is the suspect. And we've seen a syndrome that doesn't seem to occur to the average lay person. The bad guy, after you pull the gun, flees, and if you studied defensive gun usages by private citizens, that is probably in the 90th percentile of how these things go. They generally end without a shot being fired. The bad guy sees he's had what I've come to call a sudden and acute failure of the victim selection process, and he runs. And the civilian figures, well, wow, that's over. He takes a sigh of relief, holsters his gun, and does not call the police. The bad guy hides his gun. He doesn't appreciate this role reversal. He calls the cops, gives them a description of you, says you're the crazy guy who pulled a gun on him. And now he's become the complainant. You have become a suspect, and you've created a very steep hill for your attorney to climb. So be the one who calls 911. Stay on the line. The first thing you want to state is your location and repeat it. That way, if you're cut off, the police know where you are, and dispatch is going to send somebody high priority. If at all possible, have your gun back in the holster when the police get there. Do not have the gun in your hand, particularly if the officers are smart enough to approach you from an oblique angle. They're going to shout a command like, police, don't move. It's human nature, particularly under stress, that a startled response, you turn toward the sound that alerted you. What's going to happen, where the head goes, the body follows, the gun will turn with you. You will appear to be pointing a gun at the cops, and you'll probably get shot. Have your hands open, empty, and visible. Explain to the officer, I'm the one who called you. I teach what I call a 5-point checklist. First, explain the active dynamic. And the active dynamic is not that you shot this guy. The active dynamic is what he did that forced you to shoot him. This guy pulled a gun on me. This guy tried to carjack me, whatever it was. Make a statement to the effect that I'll testify against him. I'll sign a complaint. Words to the effect of, reinforcing you are the intended victim and the complainant. Victim complainant is the proper term. And this guy is the bad guy. Third, point out evidence, particularly if there has been a shooting. The scene is going to get trampled like the elephants returning to the Valley of the Lost Ivory. You're going to have paramedics and firefighters rushing in there to assist the guy medically. You're going to have brother officers rushing to the scene. Spent casings get kicked out, 10 feet up the sidewalk, and it creates a false illusion of where the shooter might have been when the shot was fired. A dropped knife may be picked up by any random passerby on the street. One case that sticks in my mind, the guy who got multiple people had been shot. A medevac helicopter arrived, and the prop wash from the helicopter literally emptied the scene of the spent casing. All of them were never recovered. Fourth, point out the witnesses. Since the 1960s, the tragic case in New York where the young woman was stabbed to death, and 20, 30 some people heard her screaming and never called the police. The syndrome is called, I don't want to get involved. If you don't point out those witnesses, the people whose testimony would support the truth of what you did will disappear. Now, what you might also get today, and it's a syndrome we've seen a little in the past, but much more recently. If you have let's say a cross-racial shooting or something that's tribal, you shot a gangbanger and there were other gangbangers present. The people who relate to the guy that you shot tend to come forward with a story of your having killed him for no reason. Now, they eventually get destroyed in cross-examination, but it turns out to take a while for that to happen. If you have pointed out the witnesses, okay, they don't have time to figure out, how do I become a hero to my gang or whatever my tribe is, and they'll probably be much more likely to tell the truth of what happened. The fifth point of the checklist is know when to shut up. People under extreme stress tend to babble. They get things out of sequence. People will ask them, how far away was the guy? And you say 3 feet, and it turns out the guy was 3 yards. One of the things that occurs in situations like this is tunnel vision. You're so focused on the opponent that it creates the literal optical illusion that the guy is closer and larger. So you said he was 3 feet away. It turns out from the surveillance cameras he was 3 yards away. It makes you look like a liar. So The fifth point is once you've established the first 4 points, make a statement to the effect of officer, detective, trooper, whoever it is, you'll have my full cooperation after I've spoken with counsel. So the 5-point checklist is establish the active dynamic, indicate that you will testify against him or sign a complaint against him, point out the evidence, point out the witnesses, and finally, officer, you'll have my full cooperation after I've spoken with counsel.
Now, one thing that I'm curious about, and I think you've spoke about this before, but what do you recommend you state on the 911 call?
Again, first give the location. Say, a man attacked me, and then branch from there. If you shot him, the suspect is down. He may still have a weapon. We need police. We need an ambulance. Give them your physical description. I want if I'm 5'10", 150 pounds, wearing a tweed jacket and black slacks, I want the officers to know the guy fitting that description is the good guy, the complainant who called in. Definitely stay on the line. Now, the dispatchers are taught to try to pump you for as much information as they can. I would make a statement to the effect that, ma'am, I have an active danger scene here. I don't have time to talk. I'll speak to the officers once they've secured the scene. They will tell you to put the gun down or unload the gun or put the gun someplace. In my case, I will probably have done a tactical reload by then if I've had to fire. I will holster the weapon, which will allow me to honestly say the weapon has been secured. The officers are in no danger from me. If there has been, what very commonly happens, you've got 2 or 3 attackers, you shoot one and the others run. Immediately give a description of the ones who fled. Now, for 2 reasons. One, obviously, if they were a danger to you, they're a danger to the community, and the sooner the cops know who to look for, the more likely they'll be caught in the capture net of the responding officers. The other reason for it is a year later when you're on trial, if the prosecutor is cross-examining you and says, let me get this straight, you're trying to tell this jury you're the good guy, but there were 2 violent men who were so dangerous that you had to shoot another man who was as violent as they, and you didn't bother to tell the police those people were out still endangering the public, and you still want us to believe you're the good guy? So one of my pet peeves is all the people who say, never talk to the police, never talk to the police. That advice comes from criminal defense lawyers who spend their careers defending guilty, high 90th percentile of their clients are guilty. And of course, they advise them not to talk to the police because anything they said would be a lie or would inculpate them. When that advice is 180 degrees off what the innocent person needs to establish their innocence from the very beginning of their contact with the law enforcement and the criminal justice system.
Moss, Brian here. Something that is kind of a follow-up on this. To my understanding, there's some issues with some providers in Washington state right now, which unfortunately is where Eric and I are based at the moment. But what are your thoughts or your recommendations on deadly force insurance coverage?
Well, first, it's technically not insurance. Insurance, we're saying we will pay for accidents and stuff like that. There is no insurance that will insure you for intentionally harming another. What you have with a group like, the Washington-based one is actually the first one that really started that whole what I call the post-self-defense support industry. Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network at armedcitizensnetwork.org. And for its total disclosure, I'm on their board of advisors. But basically, what they're saying is if we've determined we believe this was a self-defense case and you are wrongly accused or unmeritoriously sued, we will pay for your defense and, we'll be there to, provide expert witnesses and all of that and strategy counseling for your attorney. So essentially, it's a mutual support group, not insurance. There are a number of other players in the field now. And what I would say, I think it's a very good idea to belong, for the same reason that in 40 some years of law enforcement, I always told the cops, belong to your union, belong to your fraternal organization that represents you. Because once you are criminally charged, the department can't defend you. No law enforcement agency is budgeted to pay for the defense of someone who's been indicted for a crime. It's literally the opposite of what they're there for. These things get hugely expensive. A self-defense trial, once it goes to a full trial, will very likely hit 6 figures. The Zimmerman case went into 7 figures that the kid's going to be in debt for the rest of his life, even though he was correctly acquitted. I recently spoke to a police officer who was acquitted after she was charged in a fatal shooting. And she told me her legal fees alone were $411,000, not counting paying for security, because the whole politically correct thing had led to multiple death threats against her and her husband. So it's really good to have insurance. God, I use the word. It's not insurance to have. I would call it backup.
Understood. And I'm glad
or it might be considered to be prepaid legal fees.
Sure. I'm glad I phrased the question the way I did, because I want our listeners to understand that difference as well. And that's I fully understand that. There's plenty of organizations and things that and this is another thing that Craig talks about. It's like wearing a seatbelt. I hope I never need it, but I'm sure as heck I'm going to buckle it up for the time that I might.
Well,
Eric,
most
what
of
do
us
you
have
got?
fire insurance on our homes.
Exactly.
I personally never had a house fire that I couldn't put out with the extinguisher. And does that mean, damn, the insurance company stole my money, I didn't get value? What you're paying for is, first, if your house does burn down, you'll be really damn glad you had the insurance. But the rest of the time, what you're paying for is peace of mind.
Yep.
And really, the allegory there, most of us will never need to shoot anyone in self-defense. The guns we carry, the guns we keep accessible at home or a place of business, give us peace of mind.
Man, excellent discussion, Moss. This is going to be valuable to us and to our audience for posterity. Thank you. So one of the things that we'll kind of hit on, and this is 2 hot button items, and so they're 2 different spectrums. But I'd like to ask, okay, so there's a lot of buzz on the internet about what kind of items can get you in trouble, implements and so on and so forth, namely the 3.5 connector in your Glock or any kind of non-stock alteration to your pistol. And way out here on the other side is the popularity of AR pistols. Now, I for one, have definitely been investing in AR pistols because it's, in my opinion, where the law benefits us for once, firearms-wise. But do either one of those items actually really get folks in legal trouble if they have to use either one of those implements?
Well, it's really 2 different questions. Let's go with the so-called hair trigger issue first. Now, hair trigger is not a legal term, but it's a very common phrase that indicates something that's likely to go off when it shouldn't. The hair trigger personality, the hair trigger this, the hair trigger that. Basically, it does actually come up, and it will ironically usually come up in one of 2 cases. Either the guy was unintentionally shot, or what everybody in the debate seems to miss, it was a perfectly justified intentional shooting, but the other side needs some kind of hook to hang their argument on. So they falsely allege that you shot him by accident. And that is another counterintuitive thing. People say, well, wait a minute, if he was, trying to hang me for murder, and send me away for life without parole, why would he reduce the charge to manslaughter by saying it was an accident and then have only got a top sentence of 20 or 25 years? And they don't understand. A prosecutor doesn't get bonus points for convicting you for murder in the 1st degree instead of 2nd degree or manslaughter. any conviction, including a plea bargain, is seen as a win for the prosecutor's office. But if they bite off more than they can chew and they charge too high, an acquittal is an absolute humiliation for the prosecutor's office. So there's a tendency to go for the low-hanging fruit. Now, folks like you, folks like the people who are listening to this podcast, if you're involved in a shooting and you become a political football and you're unmeritoriously charged, they're going to figure out real quick, if they've got any brains at all, that the jury's going to realize you're not the typical murder suspect. You're not the dope dealer. You're not the gangbanger. You're not the wife beater. You're the kind of guy they want living next door to them, and they relate to you. And they convince them that somebody they identify with just turned into, from Dr. Jekyll into Mr. Hyde. That's pretty much the same as convincing them that they could turn into Mr. Hyde, and that's a pretty tough sell. But if they change the theory of the case, and you've got to remember, what you and I would consider a total fabric of lies, when it's uttered by an attorney, is dignified as the accuser's theory of the case. And it has to be treated in court with the same gravitas as the actual truth your side's trying to get across. So they changed their theory of the case to, well, yeah, we know he's a nice guy, but he recklessly, negligently pointed a hair trigger gun that went off by accident, blah, blah, blah. And the reckless element is what's the cornerstone of the manslaughter charge. Now, in a civil lawsuit, they'll play the exact same game, but they're doing it for a different reason. In the civil lawsuit, they're looking for money. They're looking for the deep pockets. Now, there probably aren't too many of your listeners who are both so rich and so stupid that if I went after them with a shark lawyer and somehow managed to win $1 million judgment against them, that they would have a liquid million in assets that my sharks could seize to satisfy that judgment. But most of us have homeowner liability insurance, and most of us have automobile liability insurance, and the insurance company has the money. So if they can change the theory of the case to you recklessly, negligently, accidentally shot him, recklessness and particularly negligence are the cornerstones of a wrongful death or wrongful injury lawsuit. Now, if the plaintiff's lawyer says, yes, he shot my client out of his evil racist bloodlust, the attorney for the defense, for the insurance company, is going to stand up and say, well, thank you, Mr. Plaintiff. Your Honor, dismiss the case because here is our policy and we do not cover that. I'd urge any of your listeners to look at their homeowner liability policy, look at their automobile liability policy, and it will almost certainly expressly exempt the insurance company for having to pay for what is called a willful tort, T-O-R-T. The willful tort means your deliberate act that harmed another. Read your policy. No policy is going to pay for you deliberately harming another person. By definition, self-defense is an intentional, deliberate act. So they basically, if they take that tack, they've sewn the deep pocket shut and they're not going to get money from the insurance company. But if they claim that it was an accident due to hair trigger, if they can say, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we have to show you that this person is reckless and negligent with firearm. We'll prove that he deactivates the safety devices of his lethal weapon. We'll show you the Glock Armorer's Manual that forbids putting a 3.5-pound trigger in anything but a target pistol. And this man felt he knew more about guns than the manufacturer and the 60 or 70% of American police who carry that gun. And you're playing right into their hand. If you do not have, what I look for, what I tell my students, if you don't know what the manufacturer's recommended trigger pull weight is, call the factory, call customer service, and they'll tell you. And what you want to ask them for is duty trigger pull weight. Duty doesn't mean just cops and soldiers and security professionals. Duty is the industry term for any gun that's likely to be used under high stress and self-defense. Glock will tell you 5.5 pounds minimum total pull weight, which means, and we're getting into some Glock arcania here, if you make the 3.5-pound connector with the NY1 trigger module, you'll be up in the 6-pound range. And for more than a decade, Glock has approved that, And you can subpoena in an engineer from Glock who will testify to that on your behalf. If you brought it down a 3.5 pound pole, you basically have said you know more about the gun than the people who made it. With other guns, generically the 1911 pistol, for example, the general red line for that is about a 4 pound trigger pull. If you go to the NRA matches, the National Pistol Championships, if you shoot in the distinguished class, where for many years the 1911 or the Beretta were the only pistols you could use, the referees weigh every trigger before you shoot the match, and if you're below 4 pounds, you are disqualified. Colt, who's manufactured that gun since the year 1911, without interruption, including 2 world wars, in their armorer's school says for a duty gun as opposed to a target pistol, 4 pounds minimum red line. So basically, I tell folks, if you want to have your action smooth and action honed, to make the trigger pull smoother, go ahead. I've been doing this particular type of case as an expert witness since 1984. Never once have I seen them argue the trigger pull was too smooth. Every single time, the argument they made against the defendant was the trigger pull was too light. So what is it you asked about specifically, the 3.5 pound pull on the Glock? It will generally cost you, depending on who does your Glock work, $15 to $30, $35 to get a 3.5 pound connector installed. What it can really cost you is about $450,000. If you look at the case of Santabanez versus Tomball, Texas, where basically it was a severe injury resulting from an unintentional shooting in a high-stress situation, and what's called in the trade a victim-precipitated shooting. It was the idiot felon who was responsible for the cop unintentionally firing the shot. The officer was cleared by the criminal justice system. When the plaintiff's lawyers in the civil case found out that he had put a 3.5 pound connector in his Glock 21, they made that a huge cornerstone of their argument. The suit carried on for, I think they were in a $200,000 in legal fees before they had even set a trial date. And they were going to go to court in a very blue city that's very unfriendly to police insofar as the jury pool. And they settled out of court for $250,000, quarter million. So what's it cost you to put a 3.5 pound connector in your Glock? It costs you somewhere between $15,000 and $450,000, depending how things go. And this is why Glock tells you, and I'll tell you, and I think any responsible instructor will tell you, if you're carrying that gun for serious business, use under extreme high stress, that do not go below the manufacturer's minimum trigger pull recommendation. Now, you asked about the AR pistols. That's kind of unexplored territory. It's kind of like using a suppressor on your home defense gun. If you've paid the $200 and you got the paperwork, it's perfectly legal. But any of your listeners who are shooters know how that there are even shooters out there. A ton of gun owners are surprised to know that in most states you can own a silencer for your gun, and it's perfectly legal. The general public in the jury pool is going to be very vulnerable to the argument that, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, who would use a silencer except an assassin or a drug cartel soldado or something like that? So we don't know. I found multiple cases of Class 3 weapons being used in self-defense. All of those were full auto. And what I found was interesting. Every single one, because it was a justified shooting, when it went to court, or in one case grand jury, the shooter was cleared. But the big thing to look at, every single case, it went minimum to grand jury, and some of them wound up going to trial. Now, what you've got with the AR pistol, to my knowledge, it's only been used in one mass shooting, and fortunately they didn't make a big issue out of it. But it's going to be seen as, the other side's already going to play the argument of evil assault rifle that you've heard about from every Democratic presidential candidate. Oh my God, who but a mass murderer would want to own one? And now you've got what they will describe as a sawed-off one, particularly if you have the wrist brace, which, you know how much the ATF has gone back and forth on that issue. And the surveillance camera shows that you fired it from the shoulder like a rifle, which would be the only smart way, in my opinion, to shoot the damn thing in self-defense. You're going to have that argument going against you. And I haven't yet found a case of a private citizen self-defense shooting with the AR pistol. So as far as I know, it's unexplored territory. But Mother did not raise me to be a test case, and that's why all my personal AR-15s are 16-inch or longer. So, long answer to a simple question. You've learned another lesson. Never ask simple questions to old men who like to talk a lot.
No, Moss, superb answers, and I think that puts to bed, number one, the connector issue, just simply because of your demonstrable experience in cases. I think, honestly, it certainly settles it for me, and settles it for what recommendations we will provide in our classes. So thank you very much. And, it makes me think very hard about using my AR pistols in defense. And I suppose if I'm really wanting to go that direction, if I'm wanting to have that shorter barreled item, then I just probably need to go SBR. But, then again, you open up yourself to that as an issue as well. So I think, like you said, maybe we shouldn't put ourselves as a test case.
Well, sometimes on this stuff you can put on your shooting coach hat and then put on your life coach hat, and you find yourself giving the same word-for-word advice. And in this case, my advice would be, don't do anything you can't explain. We can certainly explain the AR-15 concept as a home defense gun. The other side we know is going to take advantage of the fact that the American public has been brainwashed by the media and the Democratic National Committee for decades now. And we can simply explain and literally show with demonstrative evidence on video that your home defense gun is not just the gun that's likely to be used by the alpha male of the household, who may have been the one who bought it. It's going to be used maybe by the 5-foot-tall petite wife, maybe the teenage son or daughter who's been trained to use it responsibly and now can use it in an emergency. And any competent expert witness in the field can explain that your Joe Biden signature model double-barrel shotgun with a full power load is going to have a recoil that's very close to a .375 H&H Magnum 11-pound elephant rifle. And you see all over on YouTube videos, these damn bubbas who will give a 12 gauge to some slender petite female that's never shot a gun before. They won't show her how to hold it. And when she fires it, it knocks her on her butt. The gun goes flying and knocks her glasses off. And you hear them chuckling in the background. But show them, again, you can download a gazillion of them from YouTube. Everything from little girls to elderly granny ladies in wheelchairs fire the AR-15 for the first time, and then look at the camera and say, that was cool. And ask, which of these people would be more confident and competent to defend their loved ones if they were the only one authorized to use that weapon to fend off a home invasion? And when people can see a logical argument, okay, logic sells. When I talk to a jury, and any witness basically is there to talk to the jury, I speak in common sense language. In the land of the jury, the lingua franca is common sense. And people resonate with that. The AR pistol, you'd have to explain the difference in balance, et cetera, et cetera. You'd have to explain why, I knew ATF said it was legal to own it, but not legal to shoot it from the shoulder, wink, wink. And I'd really rather not have to go there if a 16-inch barrel with a collapsing stock that in an instant fits the smallest to the largest person in the household. And we can explain in literally 5 minutes, here's why, if you've made the choice to defend your home with a firearm, as a huge segment of American public has, that this would be the logical one for every authorized member of the family to use. So don't do anything you can't explain. As far as gun modifications, do not deactivate a safety device. We're trying to show people we're responsible gun owners. The other side is trying to establish recklessness for a manslaughter conviction. or for a wrongful death judgment. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the defendant is so reckless with firearms, he deactivates the safety devices on lethal weapons. If you don't like a grip safety on a 1911 or a mag disconnector safety on a Browning high power, get a gun that doesn't have that feature, and the issue will never come up, and the blood is out of the water. Other than that, the trigger issue, I would avoid anything lighter than factory spec on the trigger. I would avoid deactivating or removing a safety device. I would avoid a gun with a Rambo-sounding name. Don't carry, if you like a subcompact 1911, for example, I would not carry an auto ordnance pit bull when I have a Colt Defender in the safe, because you know what the other side is going to do with that. They're going to say the pet reflects the personality of the owner, ladies and gentlemen. You know how people's cars reflect their personality? Guns reflect their personality too, and he chose the pit bull. And I do not eat the yellow snow. Do not give weapons to your enemies. These are the laws of life. Life coach hat, shooting coach hat, same deal.
Well, Moss, can we assume that you feel the same way about pre-reduced travel triggers on Glock, say like the flat-face trigger types?
Yeah, the flat-face trigger, no problem. Reduced trigger travel, big problem, because anyone who has studied the issue of unintended discharges is going to tell you that the length of the pull probably is every bit as important, if not more important, than the weight of the pull.
I have, in your book, Deadly Force, Understanding Your Right to Self-Defense, you go into a chapter regarding the Zimmerman case, and that you followed that intently and had a lot of information on that. Now, I'm curious, are there any recent examples of cases where there was some unjust treatment of someone that was involved in a self-defense shooting?
Well, sure. A couple of years later, the Ferguson, Missouri shooting, the shooting of Michael Brown. More recently than that, in Oklahoma, the shooting involving Deputy Betty Shelty, who was charged with manslaughter for killing a man she reasonably believed was reaching for a gun. It's becoming almost a syndrome among plaintiffs' bar. You'll see it most commonly with cross-racial shootings, but it is happening. Now, what you've got to remember, to put it in perspective, the majority of self-defense shooting in America are recognized as such. The great majority of prosecutors are honest, decent men and women. They've got more real criminals than they can handle already, and they have absolutely no reason to manufacture any. There are a handful who are either clueless and can be kind of herded by political pressure and are bringing a case that they really are a little bit queasy about. And there are a very few who feel that, well, if it makes political hay for them, they're elected officials, it'll guarantee that they're reelected or maybe be a stepping stone to a higher office. So, yeah, you do see a few of those, but the majority of them, when it's handled correctly, when it's clear that it was self-defense, you may have to testify before the grand jury. In Texas, for example, it's standard for any homicide to go in front of a grand jury. But what we're looking at here are the exceptions to the rule, and again, an allegory. All of us who've been through training, the kind of high-profile folks that you train with and that I recommend people train with, like the people who the subject matter experts I brought together for the book we discussed. When you finished a week of training with Craig Douglas or with me or any of us, it's real easy to leave thinking, oh my God, Walking Dead wasn't a television fantasy. It was a training film, and now it's a documentary. Holy crap. And you've got to remember, the person who violently, criminally attacks you is the exception to the norm. The same is true in the aftermath. The wrongful prosecution is an aberration of the norm. But just like the physical attack, it does happen. And as John Hearn put it so well, it's not about the odds, it's about the stakes. The likelihood to some degree you can control with your own behavior and by avoiding certain situations. But when it does happen, you have to be prepared for it. And when it happens, it's a lousy time to start thinking about how you're going to handle it. So essentially, we talked earlier about insurance. If you think about it, training kind of is insurance.
I would definitely agree with that. And just to kind of summarize, so in your work as an expert witness and the cases you've been on, and I'm not talking about the prosecution, but the defendant and the legal system supporting him, the judge, jury, the attorneys tend to have a favorable outlook in personal defense cases overall. Is that would that be true?
It depends where you are, and it depends on a lot of things. First, a lot of people think I live in a gun-friendly state, so I'll be safe from this. George Zimmerman lived in a gun-friendly state, Florida. Look what happened to him. Yeah, it's going to be largely individual. It's going to be largely up to the mood of the particular prosecutor. And as I said earlier, much of it is up to the defendant. You remember when you were little, Mommy told you only got one chance to make a first impression? Okay, if you come off as a criminal who I ain't telling you nothing until my mouthpiece gets here, when the first responding officer gets there and you're standing there with the smoking gun and the guy on the ground is looking remarkably like a victim, don't come sniveling to me about jackbooted thugs that disrespect your Second Amendment rights. You were the one that waddled like a duck and quacked like a duck and were mistaken logically for waterfowl. So there's a lot that goes into it. In the cases that I've done, I generally speak for the defense, the reason being simply that in a criminal prosecution, they don't need to bring in an outsider like me. The stuff I'll testify to as to dynamics of violent encounters, how quickly things go, this, that, reconstructing the shooting and all that. They have access to the instructors at their local police academy and on their local police departments to do that, and it doesn't come out of their budget. In my case, I demand to see complete discovery, that is, all the available evidence, before I'll take a case. I turn down way more than I take. And I make a point of only speaking for certified card-carrying good guys. That's why I do it part-time and will always do it part-time. So, yeah, I get to see more wrongful prosecutions than most people. But by and large, it's like the attack itself. It's not likely to happen, but neither is a house fire, and in either case, you want to be prepared to deal with it, come out alive with minimal loss, and go back and live your life.
Well, Moss, I really would like to really hit on this very hard. This is Eric again. So we push folks in our audience and the folks in our circle, we pushed to them the importance of scenario-based training. All of what you've kind of been hitting on the last few questions is a perfect reason to make sure that folks are getting scenario-based training. You hit on...
Absolutely. I was teaching scenario-based stuff back in the 70s with cat pistols, for heaven's sake, before we had the technology we have now.
Nice.
It's stimulation. If you go into any of the shooting simulators, you're in the same position as a pilot in a flight simulator. You're getting a very realistic experience of how quick it's going to happen, and how difficult it's going to be to make the tools of correction work for you. And when you get into force on force with another living, thinking, reacting human being, even better. Shooting on the square range is fine. It develops core basic skills like punching a bag or doing a kata in the dojo. But what you're training for is dealing with a living, thinking, reacting human being who's going to have intersecting reaction loops with yours. And the only way to really get comfortable with that and confident with that is to actually get out there and do it, and do the kind of thing that Craig trains and Cecil Birch and many of the other people who were leaders in that field. So again, each of those things is a piece of the puzzle.
Absolutely. That's a superb response, and we want to continue to reiterate the importance of scenario-based, and I'll kind of make one other point on that. It's probably not best done on the live fire range. I don't know. Frankly, my opinion is it's a little bit odd and silly, but practicing or rehearsing the phone calls, the 911 call, I mean, we should be doing that as well, shouldn't we?
I think so.
So, segueing.
The problem with a lot of that is that, and with any force-on-force training, any scenario training, the time it takes for, if you've only got, let's say, a couple of instructors and one or two rooms and, maybe two or three assistant instructors to act as role players, there's a lot of downtime. A lot of times, people are outside waiting their turn. And what we try to do with that to speed it up a little bit is, if we're going to be in a weapon sterile environment anyway, we will combine that with some hand-to-hand work, some gun retention with the dummy guns. And then when it's your turn, you'll be called into the scenario. You got the simunitions gun instead of the rings dummy gun, something like that. And it makes it a little more time and cost effective. But what you've got to do when people try to rush it, because we're going to put 20 people through it, and I've only got a cadre of 4 people to help me do it. People tend to skip the debriefing afterward, and the debriefing is the critical part, where the guy who was in the fight needs to know what he did wrong, what he did right, that you, the observing instructor, can teach him, and that he couldn't see for the forest couldn't see the forest for the trees, because he was down with a guy on top of him and couldn't see the third dimension. So the real tricky part of reality-based training is doing it to where nobody's sitting with their thumb in their butt waiting to take a turn, and everybody is doing something that gives them some learning experience there.
Well, Moss, so again, segueing again here, what in the gun culture currently, what would you say the training culture is currently from, say, 30 years ago?
Oh, my God, it's the best it's ever been. We have the high-tech stuff. We have the kind of knowledge that you get from people like Craig and John Hearn. And that did not exist 40 years ago. When I started in 1972, they thought I was radical for having guys do role play with cap guns. Today we have the best available training, and it's amazing how many people are too short-sighted to see it and take advantage of it.
Well, Moss, when I was teaching what we called CQS at my older jiu-jitsu gym, which was essentially I'd gotten permission from Craig to teach his curriculum. Essentially, it was so funny, and even my time working with Craig prior was only a couple of classes, but the epiphany that I had from just really using my blue guns in that class, it's odd. I would believe that I was pragmatic about my training back then, but it's like, why in the heck am I not doing blue gun scenario-based training on a regular basis? I was like, man, this blows my mind why I have not been doing this.
Well, the key thing is to have people that you can do it with. Any of us can find, if we can't find a friend to go shooting with, we can probably find a match we can go to. There are a whole lot fewer people who are willing to grapple and, risk a sprain here and a scuff there and a bandage someplace else. And that's why you really want to be doing this under trained supervision.
Well, and I'll add to that, Moss, frankly, the gym that I was at still, I have dear friends there and my instructor there. I'm still on great terms. We still host DCQC there. It was full of, MMA studs and multiple black belts in jiu-jitsu, but still I would only have max 6 people show up at that class because I believe, number one, the adding the weapon into the picture kind of made people face something in maybe their ego, maybe it was a reality that kind of shook their opinion of their capabilities. But yeah, it was amazing to me. Sometimes I would have one person show up, but for 3 years when I was doing that class, I did it anyway because, number one, frankly, to be selfish, it was for my benefit. And for the folks that did show up on a regular basis, they were there on a regular basis. So I did it for them.
God bless you for doing that.
Thank you very much, sir. Aaron, what you got, brother?
Hey, Moss, we've taken about as much time as we said we would of yours. So again, just really appreciate it. But just wanted to ask one question about what you like to do that's way outside of this realm of martial arts and legal studies, etc.
Oh, I enjoy visiting with family whenever I can. My family's kind of far-flung all over the country. And my wife's extended family, who are wonderful people. Basically, shooting was a hobby when I was a kid that wound up becoming my lifestyle and my life's work. Usually when you make a living doing your hobby, it ceases to be fun anymore. And I've managed to escape that. So when my wife is a competitive shooter, and when we have free time, we shoot matches. And basically, we simply love what we do. I think it was Mark Twain who said, if you love your job, you never actually have to work a day in your life. So for me, the work is pleasure, and there's a whole lot of crossover there.
That's a great answer, Moss. Every now and then, we do have guests that simply say, my hobby is what we're talking about here.
Mm-hmm. Seems to be a syndrome in the business. We're in it because we love it.
Yes, sir. Well, Brian, you want to take us out here, buddy?
Fair enough. Well, again, just want to thank you for spending the time, and I'll call myself out. I mean, I remember being in grade school and high school and waiting for that next issue of Guns and Ammo to come out so I could read your articles, and having friends here that have bought guns that you tested and evaluated. And I just thought it was like pretty cool to like get to shoot a gun that you had actually written an article on. So it's an honor and a pleasure to have you on.
Oh, thank you. Any of your listeners, I've got several books out there that I think virtually all are available on Amazon. Look under Massad Ayoob. We still teach around the country, myself and my staff, through Massad Ayoob Group. And that would be MassadAyoobGroup.com. We've got something probably reasonably within striking distance of anybody in the continental U.S.
Nice. And we definitely will. There'll be some links in the description, and we're definitely going to call that out again at the end of the show so we know people can find you. So, man, you guys, this has been great. So, till next time.
Keep up the good work. You guys are putting some tremendously valuable material out there.
Awesome. We appreciate that response.
Thank you so much.
That's cool.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Moss. God
Good
bless.
night, guys.
Good night.
Night, Phil.
Man, that was just, I got to tell you, that was an amazing experience for me to get to talk to one of my like childhood mentors. And I mean, I just remember growing up reading those magazines with him writing articles in them and just being like, wow, that guy's got a cool job. And although I'm not writing articles, here we are doing kind of the same thing. And that is really cool. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, very much so. I'll add to that we've got our blog page added. You should start seeing a lot more articles coming from the three of us. And so check that out and see what you think. Let us know. There's comments available at the bottom of the blog page.
Well,
Nice.
I definitely was really excited about Massad Ayoob coming on here because there was, I can't remember what show it was because, of course, we all like a lot of podcasts in our genre and outside of our genre. But I remember seeing his name pop up on that show, and I was like, oh, man, that's awesome. I got really excited to listen. So having him on, yeah, great stuff, great content.
Really and to double down on what Brian said, I apologize, Aaron. To double down on what Brian said about being a mentor, I know that Aaron and I have been reading his articles for years as well. I think back in the day, maybe around 99, 94, 95, we started kind of getting into this, and he was prolific back then. And so I definitely was super excited to have him on the show, a wealth of knowledge.
Absolutely. Well, let's go ahead and move right into accountability. Keep it rolling here. Might be going a little long, but we got some good stuff to share with you because as this is being released, of course, this is Memorial Month, and we just went through Memorial Weekend, so that was a good time for me to be off and get caught up on some things like live shooting. I got my first live shooting in this weekend. I'll talk about that in a second, but first I want to talk about the work we've been doing all month with my gym, even though we're working from home, has all been geared around and set up for Murph. And for those of you that know, Lieutenant Michael Murphy is who that workout is named for, and it is very common that it is the one that is performed by a lot of gyms on Memorial Day. And we were unable to do that in our gym this year because of I'll try and keep my opinion out of it, but the infringement that has been placed upon us by our governor, we are unable to gather to do that. And so we did it separately, but we did it as a team and we all did it together. And it was very cool to see our community come together and do that because there's a large amount of our CrossFit gym that is military based, and this stuff strikes really close to home for. So I don't believe that there's anyone in our local CrossFit community who is not military, who does not personally have someone that they know that is near and dear that they haven't lost. And the guy that read the summary of action has actually flown 11 of those missions to bring those boys home to their families, and that's huge. And that was just really important for me to be able to participate in that. And although I only completed a half Murph myself, I am not at the physical ability to complete the entire task. I did do it minus the weight vest at RX Movement, and that's an actual Murph is with a 20-pound vest, 1 mile run, 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 300 squats, followed by a second 1 mile run. And so I ran a mile, did 50 pull-ups, did 100 push-ups, 150 squats, and I was just gassed at that point. Unfortunately, my hypertension prevents me from pushing my heart any farther because I wanted so badly to complete that, but I had to actually listen to my body, and it's something that's hard for me to do because I want to run hard and I want to run fast with and I'll say it with the kids, but I'm not a kid anymore, so I got to start listening. But very cool to have participated in that, and again, did get to shoot as well. So shot the drill, and Aaron and I were talking about this earlier and joking about how I get to talk about how I beat myself up. I didn't have full-size paper plates. I just had like the little 6-inch ones. So I was like, oh, that's fine. No big deal. I'll just shoot the 6-inch ones. So we set it up, and I was there with a friend, and we actually dealt each other cards, which was cool because it kind of pushed each other to, flinch or almost draw, when you go to do it. And we also set up at like 9 yards, and I was not paying attention. So needless to say, my scores were not where I expected them to be. I think my best score was 7 out of the 12 on paper, and however, all of them were just off paper. Full-size plate would have counted, but here's the big deal. I shot this with my carry pistol, my SIG 365.
Legit.
And I have been kind of avoiding the fact that, and this is true for a lot of SIGs, I've owned a ton of them, it shoots a little off from the factory, and I have not fixed those sights. And I've been shooting drills that don't really matter. I'm still getting, A-zone hits, and, they're all a little bit, the group is just slightly centered to the left, and no, it's not my trigger pull. I've been not. Through it.
No, it's not.
So it's something that really made me realize, though, pushing myself on the smaller target and the longer distance, I need to fix that, man, because that is my pull up and point of aim. It's definitely still in the vital zone, for what I'm shooting at, but that really needs to be where I want it, because I want to be able to put, I need to be able to do a group of 5 in a head box at 10 yards. That needs to be something that I can do. So that's my takeaway is I need to make sure that my gear that I carry is legit and squared away, and calling myself out because it's not, and I have the ability to fix that. So I'm going to work on that. Hopefully by the next time we shoot a drill for that, I'll take the extra time to go ahead and get those sights squared away. So anyway, I think I'll go ahead and hand it off. Aaron, what do you got for us?
Well, first off, Brian, I wanted to say, man, awesome work on the Murph. You're already having a winning performance on that, because most people aren't even going to attempt that. So, man, great job. I was stoked to hear you working on that. So
thank you.
And so I'll give you my workout compared to you in that Murph. I did get in one good cardio session this week. I've maintained my daily alternating squats or pull-ups. I am up to 70 squats in one. That's body weight squats, of course. And then I'm up to 40 pull-ups. Now, again, those are assisted, but those are a pretty difficult workout for me, so I'm glad I'm increasing those every day. Now, I did get to go to another JITS class, just one of the solo just one of the solo drill classes, but it was, again, still fun to be back in the gym. Now, I do know that here about in the next week and a half, they are actually going to be able to hold classes. So really stoked about that. Now, I had not started my intermittent fasting like I wanted to. Just to be honest, that was a little bit off my radar than it should have been, but I am starting that process tonight. Now, one thing that I wanted to say after starting Lanny Basham's book, I've been practicing visualization every day, which is great because I used to do a lot of mindfulness meditation, which is a really great practice to do also. This really is a lot like mindfulness. So I'm glad to be doing that, to be working on my shooting from a visualization and mindful standpoint, but also getting a little bit of the same effects that mindfulness helps with your mental capacities and calming you down, etc. Now, I did not live fire the drill this week, and I'll tell you why here in just a second, but I did dry fire that, and it was actually today. Now, I knew that Brian was using his smaller carry pistol, so I, in a spirit of supporting him, I went ahead and ran my Glock 42, and I ran that from my keeper's errand, and ran the drill here, and I actually did it at 4 yards, and but it was a great drill. But I'm looking forward to getting out there and doing that live. Now, the reason why I didn't get to do it live is that I had another lesson with Mike Brown. Went out there, met him at 7:15 in the morning, and we were planning on doing that lesson, and then right after it going into shooting an IDPA match together, so got together for that lesson, and it's always a great time getting together with such a great coach. I mean, we literally went through the test, right? The 10 yards, 10 seconds test, and now he makes you do it from the holster. But we ran through that. I ran through it literally one time, and then he did a demo and asked me what he did differently. Well, I don't want to spill the beans on something that Mike taught me, but at the same time, I'll just say he taught me a really profound aspect of the pistol grip. And most people will know that in practical shooting, the grip is the most important technique of all of your shooting. So he helped me with a really profound aspect of my grip, and instantly I was shooting about 25 to 30% better. After that, I shot several other drills. He had several different iterations of bill drills and transition drills, and I shot most of them clean, which was a lot of fun. So that another great pivotal class with him. Then when we went and shot the IDPA match right after, and the help that I had that morning showed up in my scores. I think I performed my best at any match, and I can say that I believe that on my next match, which we've been shooting the classifier every match, because as you guys may know, you have to qualify for 4 different divisions if you want to go to nationals. So most of the clubs are shooting the 5x5 classifier as one of the stages. I believe that I'm going to class up next match. So with the help that Mike gave me this weekend. So I'm pretty stoked about that. Well, that's all I've got for this week. How about you, Eric?
Well, guys, that's awesome accountability, and I'll first start with Brian. Yeah, like Aaron, I was so pumped about your Murph, and frankly, folks need to realize that is a brutal workout, and all of us, all 3 of us, are closer to 50 than we are 40. But I believe that all of us are doing fairly well. Brian is definitely setting the example for working hard in his physical fitness. So thanks a lot for sharing that, Brian. And being a veteran, the Michael Murphy story, Lieutenant Michael Murphy, of course, a lot of folks may know, was a Medal of Honor recipient posthumously. So go check out his story, because, Memorial Day is about celebrating the lives of the folks that fought for our freedoms and gave the ultimate sacrifice, though. So thanks for sharing that, Brian.
Yep.
With Aaron's accountability, I was also super pumped because, number one, being a student of Mike Brown's, also in pistol craft, it always amazes me hearing Aaron's lessons and what he's taken away from it. And then also seeing his performance increase is just a lot of fun seeing. And so, Aaron, I saw your scores, man. Incredible job, winning performance. And I just wanted to say congratulations on that.
Oh, thanks, bro, man. I really appreciate it. Yeah, again, it's a blessing having Mike nearby. I wish you guys were here so you could come take lessons from me, but I'm sure that you guys will be able to hook up with him sometime soon, and I'll do my best to pass on some of the stuff that he's taught to me.
Well, what we need to do is set up a EvoSec crew trip to Oklahoma, and maybe we can set up an 8-hour or something like that with Mike, myself, Brian, traveling there. So that'd be awesome if we could set that up.
Oh man, it'd be a total blast. I'll bring it up to Mike.
Yeah,
Nice.
With that said, I'll also add that Mike continues to perform at the top levels. Aaron, did he not shoot top in the pistol? And he hadn't even been competing for a decade.
Oh, he certainly performed at the top of the pistol classes. That with PCC, a lot of times you'll see the PCC as the top shot, but that's all right. Glad to have those guys in there. But yeah, for pistol, Mike was top for sure.
Awesome. Doesn't surprise me. Well, moving on to my accountability, I had 3 early morning workouts, and this is something that I'm super stoked about, is that I actually have been working out in a gym again. Not this prison gym, which I've gotten a lot out of, but there's actually a gym like hidden on the airfield. So one of my colleagues brought me in on that little secret. And I mean, it's a legitimate gym in a hangar with squat racks, a Concept 2 rower, which I was really pumped about for my cardio, and barbells, dumbbells, you name it, it's there. So that's been a blast. So I got some really good strength and conditioning this week. Moving on to my dry fire, I dry fired 7 days this week. Frankly,
Awesome.
I've been bumping that up simply because, number one, I haven't been able to do any live jiu-jitsu. And so I'm like, okay, well, I'll just bump up my dry fire. So I worked on the casino drill, worked on the test, which Aaron mentioned. And I also did the drill of the week, the happy smiley face from Claude Werner, which he blessed us with authorizing us to do that drill. So one of the things I did is I felt like I needed a little more pressure. So I added a timer to it because I'm doing it by myself. So that was a really good additional set of pressure. So moving on to my education, I didn't really do education per se this week, but I figured I figured I would mention what I've been reading, which when I pass an MWR, that's morale, welfare, and recreation in the military, when I pass their little libraries that have free books, it's like a pastime for me. I can always find superb books there for free. And I found a Brad Thor, like a 2015 book called The Code of Conduct, and I hadn't read that one yet, and it's been awesome so far. So you guys check that book out. So I think pretty much that does it for my accountability for the week. I guess that pushes us into the drill of the week. Aaron, you mentioned the test with Mike. How do you like that drill, by the way?
Oh, it's great. It's, getting. Well, let me digress a little bit. From my very first lesson from him, I think I've had 4 with him in the last less than a year. I think. Now, he always starts out with his own shooting, and every lesson that we have, you start out with that test. And I am glad to say that I shot it still fairly well the first time, but the next time after he helped me with my grip even further, which just to explain real quick though, we've all worked hard on our grips and have really good grips, but just that little bit more profound help that he gave me, I was able to shoot that test significantly better, 100% clean and much tighter groups. And yeah, it's a great test. People sometimes, there was a thread on one of my forums where this guy said that, yeah, IDPA is, 3 to 20 yards, close distances. And Mike and I were talking about that, and he just kind of laughed. When you're balancing speed and accuracy, 10 yards actually is where things start getting a little bit hairier. So, it's a good distance to see how you're shooting.
Yeah, and that brings me to, I'll digress just a split second in my dry fire, and I forgot to mention my office area up here at night, nobody's around, and I've got a full 25 yards. I actually have more than that. So part of my dry fire this week was actually at distance at 25 yards at B8 Bulls. And I also did the test dry at 10 yards. So that was kind of a fun addition. And I will tell you that, yes, you can use scaled down targets. It's valuable. But your eyes, when they can actually see the difference at distance, it does make a difference. So I'll just add that. If you've got the capabilities to dry fire at actual distance, I think it's a good thing. So without belaboring too much further, that actually is why I mentioned that again, because Aaron, you said that, and I'm like, I wanted to do the test this week for for the drill of the week. And I think we're going to go ahead and repeat that just as like a test retest, to use Kelly Starrett's terminologies. So let's go ahead and do the test this week, see where we're at compared to last time. And to reiterate, that's a B8 bull at 10 yards, 10 seconds, 10 rounds. And let's report back and see how we do in comparison to the last time we did it, folks. So unless you guys got anything else out there, Aaron and Brian, I think that does it for the week. So
Nope.
Until next time, stay safe out there.
Get out there and shoot. Take care, guys.
Yeah, take it easy.